Welcome back, everyone, to NeuroAlchemy, a NeuroSynergy podcast, where healing is understood as both science and soul, and where transformation unfolds through nervous system awareness, embodiment, and lived experience. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Young. Here on NeuroAlchemy, we move slowly and intentionally. We define terms clearly as if you're hearing them for the very first time, because clarity creates safety, and safety opens the door to deeper healing opportunities. Today's conversation centers on the breath, trauma healing, and nervous system regulation. If you're sensitive, overwhelmed, or navigating recovery, you're invited to listen gently. You're welcome to step away. Nothing here requires pushing or performing. Take a breath. Your body is already listening. Today, I'm joined by Jon Ferrand, and I'm really glad to welcome him to NeuroAlchemy. Jon supports individuals in healing past trauma through a blend of breathwork, body-based approaches, neuroscience-informed tools, and intuitive awareness. What I appreciate about Jon's work is how grounded and accessible it is. He helps people understand that healing isn't abstract or mystical. It's physiology, it's safety, it's embodiment. Jon weaves together ancestral wisdom and modern neuroscience in a way that helps people feel empowered in their own bodies rather than dependent on external fixes. Jon, thank you for being here and welcome to NeuroAlchemy.
Hello, Sarah. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having me today and for creating this space for me to express myself. I'm very happy to be here today.
Thank you. Before we move into the conversation, I like to begin by helping us all arrive. Jon, how are you arriving today, physically, emotionally, mentally, or energetically?
I'm super happy. I'm calm. I'm full of energy, and I'm ready to share with all our listeners what I have to bring into this world about breathwork and healing.
Thank you so much for naming that. And there's no right way to arrive here. However, your showing up today is enough. And that's not just for Jon, but for all of our listeners out there. Before we go deeper, I'd love to orient our listeners with a few simple definitions. Jon, let's start with breathwork. In everyday language, what is breathwork and why does it have such a direct impact on the nervous system?
For me, breathwork is a toolbox of exercises that we can use consciously with our breath, because mainly breathing is a subconscious mechanism, but we can powerfully act on this with our awareness.
Beautiful. Next, when people hear somatic work or body work, what does that actually mean in practice?
In practice, for me, it means coming back to our body sensation and body emotion, not being in the mind, but very into our body, what we feel, locating which part of the body is activated, where is pain or there is energy, blockage, and really concentrating about.
You also reference ancestral knowledge in your work. How do you define that in a grounded, accessible way?
Ancestral knowledge is everything that concerns what our ancestors were doing, our primitive people maybe, and mostly is things that we forgot, and we are not practicing today, but we are rediscovering through ancient texts or ancient traditions that are coming to surface again.
And finally, when you say neuroscience informed tools, what does that mean for someone who wants practical, real world support?
Neuroscience tool means that it has been proven and discovered very recently by neuroscience, because most of the neuroscience discoveries are younger than 20 years ago old, and it's very cutting edge, it's very new. And thanks to many recent discoveries, we are going to many breakthroughs, and it brings so much new tools into our life.
Thank you for so much for slowing that down. That context helps our listeners feel safe and oriented. I'd love to begin with your own story. Was there a moment in your healing journey when you realized the breath was essential rather than optional?
Yeah, many times I think, and the most important part was my first breathwork ceremony, which bring me to come to a very massive breakthrough. In just 45 minutes, I transcended anger, I forgave parents, I healed through inner child healing just in a few in one session. But I think that when I reflect about my breath, it has been with me all my life. I had asthma when I was young. I learned how to breathe with quote unquote when I was doing sports, running, swimming. And finally, I used a lot of breath when I was doing yoga, pranayama, etc. So my journey through the breath was escalating, and really it was with breakfast work that I really felt the real power of the breath.
How did your own experiences with trauma shape your understanding of the nervous system?
I think it's a mix between sensations, emotions, and memories. And during breathwork sessions, I sometimes, not often, not every always, have memories that come up, and I associate these memories with emotions. And after the session, I really feel a deep sense of release, of lightness, and more of energy, more of power. And I really believe and I experience that each session helps me to strengthen and to be a better version of me. And I am also getting more resilient about the past traumas. So there's some things that could trigger me in the past do not trigger me anymore.
For listeners who are completely new to breath work, you often speak about 3 pillars of breath. Could you explain those in simple everyday language?
Absolutely. For me, the breath must be observed from 3 angles. The first angle is what I call the controlling breath. It means that when you are angry or you are stressed, this is a very popular and well-known practice. You can take deep breath, slow breath to calm down, but you can also, on the other side, use activation breath to get more clarity in your energy. And you have many, many tools to control your state, emotional and mental state through your breath. For example, in my everyday life, I use exercises to skip coffee or to go to sleep. And there are many tools. So this is the first part. The second part is functional breathing. It's how we breathe every day. And we must know that about 70% of the population does not breathe correctly every day. So we have to relearn how to breathe correctly. And when we master those 2 pillars, we can also use what I call the healing breath, which is what we do in somatic breathing to release emotions, to break limiting patterns, and to really become a better version of ourselves. And when you combine those 3 pillars, you become very powerful, I say.
How does the breath act as such a powerful reset button for the brain and the body?
In fact, we are going to be a little bit scientific here or physiologic. When you use an activation breath, you increase the bloodstream into your prefrontal cortex so that your brain gets less active, and so you can more focus on your body sensation. It's very well proved and very well synthesized here, but when you, for example, in 5 minutes of active breath work, you really feel a very deep sense of calm because your mind has really been in kind of quiet mode or pause mode. So this is how it happens.
Can you give us an example of those different breath types, like the activation breath? Can you show us what that activation breath looks like?
Yeah, an activation breath is, for example, you can take an inhale for 2 seconds and an exhale for 2 seconds, like this. And when you do that very quickly, starts very small if you are new, just 30 seconds, and you will see better sensations. And with more practice, you can extend the length. And after a few minutes, you may feel some sensation in your hand or in your feet, like tingling sensations. But if you are in certain medical conditions, you must do that with a specialist, even especially if you have cardiovascular disease or high blood pressure, something like that. But if you do under 3 minutes, you are safe.
Can you share an example of how someone's internal state shifted after working with these pillars?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I have two examples that come in mind. I have a client of me during a session. She was breathing for about 20 minutes with pauses under my guidance. And at the end of the exercise, we performed a breath hold for 1 minute, 1 minute and a half. And then I asked her to release her breath and to picture in her mind that she was releasing her emotions or trauma. And just after that, she started to cry, to have tears, but she wasn't in pain. She was happy to release that. So it was a kind of happy tears, something. So yeah. And the other example is another client who was really doing functional breathing with me. And after a week or two of work together, she reported me that she was having a better sleep and less coughing. She has been coughing for years, doing a lot of tests, and she never found out why. But with a better breath, she reduced considerably her coughing.
I really appreciate how the breath is like a doorway. It's like a secret doorway, right? Into our nervous system, into our stories, into everything really that we are. A lot of cultures believe that the breath is part of spirit, right? And so when we're breathing in and out of the very nature of creation itself. Let's talk about trauma through a physiological lens. How does trauma live in the body long after the original event is over?
Recent studies have shown that when you experience a trauma, whether it is what we call a big T trauma or small T trauma, big T trauma is what you can imagine. It's a car accident, it's abandon, it's grief. And small T trauma can just be an argument with someone. It can be a deception, a sadness. Every kind of emotions, when they are experienced, if they are not evacuated with I would say awareness, they can be energetically stored in your body in some kind of blocks in several parts. And with life, when times goes, you can accumulate, stack those blocks, energy blocks, and it can create imbalances, turn into disease or such things like that. And that's why it's very important to do energetic work, such as breath work, to release, to clean the body. It's like you clean your house, you clean your car. It's maintenance for the body, for the soul and the mind, maybe. So, yeah.
What does it look like when someone is stuck in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn?
Yeah, you just have to look outside, and unfortunately, many people are stuck in those modes. In fact, you described three parts of how our nervous system functions. And when you are in this kind of state, it corresponds to our primal way of reacting. In many centuries ago, when we encounter a threat, you go into fight or flight or freeze mode, which is automatic and your reaction to a threat. So you face a tiger, for example, whether you can engage the fight or you can choose to run or you can freeze and you fell on the floor and act as you are dead. And so you are not, your predator is not interested by you. But today we don't face tigers in the streets. We face bad news, we face chemicals, we face heavy pressure at work, at home. And today, this is the cause that pushes into those kind of modes. And the problem is that being in fight or flight mode is meant to be only temporary. And when we are chronically inside this mode, the body constantly releases hormones or uses energy, and it burns out our body and our health. So you create a lot of diseases, chronic stress, cancer, autoimmune disease, everything. Some studies show today that 95% of actual disease, current diseases are related to stress causes. So this tells about everything. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's because us humans, we've evolved as fast as we have. Those signals were designed to be, life or death, right? If we wanted to save our species, save ourselves, but over time the stresses for humans changed, right? And they've become more and more and more. But simultaneously, we have this other problem is that we have a lot of human beings that have no idea how much power they actually have over their own nervous system, over their breath, over their internal and their external state. So thank you so much for sharing this. Share how can the breath begin to shift those states that we were just describing safely?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you are under constant stress or punctual stress, very simple tool is to come back to a deep, calm breath. So you just have to take, for example, 3 deep breaths through the nose. You inhale at your maximum capacity and you slowly exhale through your mouth, just like through a straw, doing a little flow of air. And then you send the signals to your body that you are safe and there are no threats around you. So it's very quick and simple, maybe 30 seconds, a minute, and you can come back to what we call inside the window of tolerance of the nervous system.
And when John's talking about sending signals to our bodies, what he's essentially saying, you guys, is that breathing itself creates those signals. It's not anything extra that you need to imagine signals going to your body. It's very neuroscience informed, right? When you breathe, you activate a different part of your nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system. And that allows you to come into a state of rest, digest. So, absolutely. Jon, what's the difference between emotional processing and physiological regulation? And why does that distinction matter?
Can you repeat between emotional processing and physiological? Yeah, I think both are linked, as I was talking previously, because your emotion can be stored in your body, but you cannot act on your stored emotions through your body first. So you have to release your emotions through practices, and then you can rebalance your body and release your, I would say with quotes, tensions or blockage. And so yeah, so for me I think that the first part is acting on emotional release.
Everything is in layers, isn't it, Jon?
Yeah, sure. Sometimes it's very thin layers, but yeah, you have to take things in order. But what is magical is that in breathwork, you release only what is ready to be released. You cannot force yourself into releasing something that is not the right moment. And also on the opposite, you cannot release too much at a time. So nature is very well organized.
Many listeners hear terms like energy work and wonder if it's too abstract. How do you explain energy work in a grounded, non mystical way?
Interesting. I start by saying that we have proved today through quantum physics that everything is energy. And when you look at an atom from very, very close size, there is the middle and the electrons. And between that, there are only energy, and it's 99% of the atom is energy. So when you start to picture that everything is energy, you can play on that, and you can imagine I am energy, my emotions are energy, so I can stock energy, and I can work on that. So bit by bit, we can explain how we can address that with basic tools, basic notions.
That was wonderful. How do ancient wisdom traditions and modern neuroscience actually support one another?
Yeah. I like this one. In fact, we have found ancient text from many traditional people, whether it's Vikings, samurais, or Indians from North America or people from South America. And we have observed, or we know now, that before going to war or to battle, they used to use the breath before entering battlefield and after battlefield. So at the beginning of before a battle, they use activation breath to condition themselves, to build focus, energy, and to strengthen. Like maybe in rugby sport, before a match, some people are doing a dance with tribal movements. It's also the same. And also after the battle, they use down regulation breath so they can evacuate the traumas or the horrible things they seen or done during the battlefield. So this expands. And we also have witnessed this on other animals. Recently, on bears, we have been hunted and we saw them doing this down-regulating breath work in their belly, then shaking and really evacuating the trauma. And when you look at ancient tribals, you know that they also did ceremonies around fire with music, with dance, with chanting, and they didn't have the tools that we have today with neuroscience. So they were not observing their brain, but they were doing the same, activating energy. When you move, you have your specific breath pattern. When you chant, you move energy through your vocal cords, etc. And today we perform the same practices, but with electrodes on the head, on the brain, and we recorded the brain activity during those events. And we were able to analyze and get conclusion about what was really happening during those ancestral practices and now with our modern tools.
Why is integration often more effective than choosing just one approach alone?
Integration is very important because one, it helps you to not store a recent event and recent trauma, so you don't accumulate dust or garbage. And it's also one of the way to clean. And I missed a part of your question, sorry.
No, you're all good, Jon. The question was just about why integrating more than one tool is often more effective than just doing one thing and not integrating other.
Yes. But it's an holistic approach. For me, if you don't work on the three pillars simultaneously, it's not correctly balanced. If you have a dysfunctional breath, you will create more stress. You will have a very short window of tolerance. So you will be very frequently activated. You will be very often in fight or flight. It's not very good. If you don't have the tools to regulate your breath instantly, you will remain in stress moment, in freeze moment. It's not good. And if you don't use somatic tools to release what you have stored in the past, you will be carrying a big chunk full of garbage, and you will feel heavy, and it's not healthy to live like that. So working on the three sides is very coherent for me.
How does intuition play a role in trauma recovery?
Intuition is kind of magic because it's linked with your subconscious, and we know that today that subconscious mind is responsible for 90% of our behavior. So when you allow your conscious brain to shut down and to let your intuition speak, you can find some truth, inner truth or pure truth coming up. And I have experienced it myself during breathwork session. After a few minutes of practice, when your mind is very calm, I have ideas that come to me, whether it's creativity or whether it's certainty. And in those kind of moments, I know that this is pure clarity and what comes to my mind is real. It's very important.
What signs show up in the body when someone is becoming more regulated and embodied?
You can, when you are more regulated, you are much less susceptible to feel stress and to be impacted by quote bad emotions. You can still feel anger or sadness or stress, but you can kind of see them from a third person eye, and you can not be victim, you control them. You say, you can acknowledge them. You say, okay, this is happening to me right now. I know why it's happening to me, and I can controlling and turn around.
What do you wish more people understood about the body's built-in healing systems?
I wish people realize that we have been breathing from the day we were born, and then before us, every generation, every being has breath, and that it is the most experienced tool that nature gave us. So it's very powerful, it's very experienced, it's very stable. When
It's
you know
also
that,
very accessible.
yeah, it's free, it's immediate, it's with you.
Why do you think breath work is so often maybe misunderstood?
First of all, it's very recent. The first people who have made study on breathwork, it was after Second World War or just a bit after, so it's more, just a little bit more of 50 years old, so it's quite recent. Also, there are many advertising that show people having traumatic or big dramatic experience that is very, in reality, it's very rare. So it's not happening like that, but it can happen, but it's rare. So there is a misconception about that. And finally, also, as it's a free tool, it's a free medicine, I think some lobby are not very keen on that. It will be more and more popular and more used in the upcoming years.
Yeah, I think for some people it might even seem too easy, right? Like, oh, you mean all I have to do is breathing? Don't I already breathe? Right? They might think in that way because, well, John, we live in a world where everything has an expense, everything has a cost, right? So I think sometimes when people hear that there's methods of healing through something that you already have with you at all times, it's accessible, it's available, it's essentially free. I think part of it's like our culture. They're like, free. If it's free, there's a problem, right? They think that there's something behind that, even though there's really, really not. John, I'd love it if you could do our I call it a challenge of the week, and perhaps I shouldn't call it a challenge. I'll have to come up with another way of wording it so it doesn't sound like work, because I really want this to be something, just a simple practice that you would recommend for our listeners to try every day to get a bite-sized, experience of some of the things we're talking about today.
Absolutely. And maybe you can call it an invitation. What I suggest is to everyone who is listening to us today, say each time they feel that there are pressure that's coming up for them, or they feel that there is a speed is increasing in their moment and they lose control of their life, they just put one hand on their belly, one hand on their chest, they close their eyes, they take a deep inhale as we did at the beginning, and they exhale through the mouth. And while they are breathing, when during the inhalation, they think about the fact they are.
John, what sensations are normal, and when should someone slow down or stop? So as you guys are establishing more flow, I like to think of it as flow, right? Because the energy when we're doing that breath work, it tends to flow rather than be blocked. As you guys reestablish your flow, just remember to listen to your body. Your body is is such a good teacher. Jon, as we begin to close, what do you hope listeners walk away feeling after hearing this conversation today? And Jon, what is one small truth about healing that changed your life? So in other words, healing is profoundly transformational. Jon, thank you for such a grounded and insightful conversation. Your clarity around breath, trauma healing, and the nervous system is a powerful reminder that healing is both ancient and modern, as well as deeply accessible. Before we close, I want to say this. I never leave these conversations unchanged. If there's something that I'm taking with me, there's something I'll reflect on later, and something I'll continue to integrate after we stop recording. And if this episode resonated with any of you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it. That's how these conversations travel and reach the people that need to hear them the most. For listeners who want to learn more about Jon's work, all the relevant links will be included in the show notes. Until next time, this is Dr. Sarah. This is NeuroAlchemy. May you breathe deeply, trust your inner wisdom, and continue becoming who you are meant to be. Bye for now.